We're gonna okay, hang on 1 second. All right. Okay, Trevor. Good morning. Awesome to be back on the Friday 15-minute Zoom of inspiration or Instagram or whatever it's on. Okay, so I don't remember. I think the title was something along the lines of the Jewish source of wealth and strength. Where do we get it from? What are we so blessed? But before we even get there, the question is, well, that I want us to think is, what do we define as our wealth, our inheritance, and our strength? So keep that in your mind, because very often we say this is where we get something from, or this is what something is, but we don't define, well, what is that? And we see that happen very often in in different Mishnayos, Ezehu Gibor, what's considered strong, Ezehu Chacham, what's considered wise. And sometimes the conventional understanding of ideas or concepts are not really the Jewish understanding of that. So first, we're going to have to make sure that by the end of this, we have the definition. And then when we know what the definition is and what we're looking for, then we can find out where to look at. So it's very interesting. In the beginning of this week's parsha, what happens is it says the Jews leave Egypt, as we know, and it says v'chamushim alu b'nei Israel. They left armed. Right? And everybody says, well, what do you mean they left armed? They didn't really have an army at that point in time. Think about, for example, when we left Europe and came to Israel and the Haganah, they were armed. They were armed with like nothing. They scrapped together whatever they could have. And therefore, where does the Torah come off in saying when the Jewish people left, they left with such tremendous strength and they had such tremendous military power, they were armed, ready to fight? Everybody says, I don't understand. That makes absolutely no sense. Where did they get that from? So there's one explanation that says the word chamushim, Rashi brings this down, doesn't mean armed, but it means, and it's a very painful medrash that he brings down, it says chamushim means from the word achomesh, fifth, that the Jewish people left a fifth of who they were when they were in Egypt. Lots of different discussions about that. But, if a person were to say to the Jewish people, hey, let's pick up and go to Israel, we saw back in the time of Ezra, after the first destruction, few people went. And one could dare say that if we went right now and said, hey, you know what? And we're living this, and I'm saying this as the hypocrite myself, you know what? Imagine in 1930, if somebody said, wow, you'd have Israel, and everyone would be like, we're going to Israel, like we have for thousands of years. Imagine if you said in the year 2025, hey, let's all pick up and go to Israel. It's a great country. Most of us, on this Zoom, I imagine all of us, because in Israel, it's almost Shabbos already, we're like, of course we love Israel, but I'm not going. What do you mean? We can leave exile and go back to our homeland. It's a crazy thought. So they say that actually only a fifth of the Jews went. They said the others, unfortunately, didn't make it out. It was perhaps for a different reason, but the Jewish people would have been much bigger and stronger. Only a fifth went out. Some were so shakua, were so Egyptian in nature that they lived and they died as Egyptians in Egypt, and they didn't pick up and go, which I think is such a real message. Again, we don't study Torah to understand historically what happened, 3,500 years ago. We want to do it so we can understand, wait, what's going to be like when we all return to Israel now? How's that going to work? And that's chamushim, a fifth. But if you take chamushim as armed, what does it mean they left armed? Where do we get our strength? Where do we get who we are? And the next pasuk says something really interesting, which has a beautiful explanation by Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, not the one who is called the Rav of YU, but the Brisk Yeshiva. He says the next pasuk, right after it says they left chamushim, armed, it says, Vayikach Moshe es atzmos Yosef imo. Moshe took the bones of Joseph. So we're talking hundreds of years later, right? Joseph said, I want a promise. Yaakov, we know when he passed away, they took him to Eretz Yisrael and he's buried. We can go visit his matzeva and daven by his matzeva at Maras HaMachpelah, right? So we can all go over there to Hebron. Yosef said, no, I'm staying here. But do me a favor. When we leave, because we will leave, I want you to exhume my bones and bury them in Israel. And I could say we could go to Shechem to visit him, but it's not so pashut to go to our own city of Shechem anymore. But Yosef's buried in Shechem. Why? Because Moshe, when they're leaving, says, oh, wait, I remember we told, old Zadie Joe that we were going to bring him with us to Eretz Yisrael. So when all the Jews are getting ready to leave, he runs to take these bones. So Rav Soloveitchik says, why is this so important to tell us right now? They left armed, and he comes with the bones. So he says as follows, a beautiful idea. He says that the root, the shorish of the word atzmus, which is bones, etzem is a bone, is also atzmus, one's own essence. right? My etzem, my who I am. What am I all about? And he explains, what does it mean Moshe took his bones? Why do we take bones? Why do we go visit Bubbas and Zetas, right? If all that's left is really just Atsamas? Because bones is the essence of the physical body, and Atzmus is the essence of the spiritual values of who that person was. Moshe wasn't just saying, hey, let's make sure to bury our great great grandfather Zeta in Eretz Yisrael. Let's take him with us. He's saying, let's take the essence of what Yosef represented, a person who had unbelievable commitment, even under the most difficult circumstances, of maintaining his Jewish values, under the greatest pressures, being alone and isolated in an environment which was the exact opposite of what a Jewish city and a community was like, all by himself, and yet somehow he found the strength, no matter how difficult, to go ahead and maintain and be a Jewish leader. He says, Chevra, when we're leaving, let's take what our Zeta was like with us and remember. And if you think about that, very often there's a phrase that I'm sure you've heard before. And in one hand, it's beautiful. And on the other hand, sometimes we lose something, as they say, the baby with the bathwater. Very often people say things like, you know what, I want to give my kids those things that I never had. You heard that phrase a lot. I'm not sure if people still say it now. You know what, now that where I am, I want to give my children and my grandchildren all those things that I couldn't have. And usually what they mean by that is, I want to make sure that they have a cottage. I want to make sure they were able to travel and I can afford all these great toys and everything's amazing. And I didn't have that growing up. I want to make sure they have those things that I couldn't have. That's great. But what? What's Atzmus Yosef? What's the essence of who our parents, grandparents, and great grandparents were? He says, Moshe said, wait, if you want to hand over something to the next generation, what are you going to take? Take who they were. And very often at the expense of the wealth and the strength, the physical wealth and the physical strength that we say, I want to make sure my kid has that. They're going to play hockey. They're going to go to the gym. They're going to have this. They're going to earn a great living. But the other side, the spiritual strength and the spiritual wealth and richness in life, for some reason that gets left on the banks of the shores of the Yam Suf. So when Moshe is sitting there and picking people up, he says, if we're going to arm our Jewish people and we're going to be able to fight, he says we're going to be able to fight because we're taking the essence of who our people were, that we're able to maintain their identity and under any circumstance overcome. That was tremendous strength. Lifting weights at the JCC is good, but being able to go ahead and say, despite what the world tells me I have to do and be and the values that they have, even in my own environment, I can overcome that and do exactly what I believe is more important. That's real strength. And in fact, it goes so far. I saw a beautiful medrash that says as follows. It says, when it says this pasuk in the Mechilta, part of our medrash, part of our oral tradition and transmission of sort of back end stories of what it's trying to teach us, it says it's telling us the wisdom and the chesed of Moshe. Why was Moshe so wise? Shekol Yisrael oskim babiza. The Jewish people are saying, hey, let's take all the gold and silver from the Egyptians. Let's get our suitcases, pack it up, and listen, they're saying, take all this stuff. You worked for us. And they're running around to be able to fill their bags with as much gold and silver, be it at the shores after they drown or whatnot. Moshe saying, wait. Where are the bones of Yosef? If Yosef was going to say what's important, where are those things? And therefore, it's specifically at the moment where the Jewish people are running, saying, I got to get my strength and my wealth. Moshe's saying, I do too. They're just running in two totally different and opposite ways and directions with that. And I think that's such a powerful message for us to think about when we think, where do we get those things that are so enriching in our lives? And very often, we sometimes forget that the things that look so sparkly in front of us that could achieve what we wanted to achieve might actually, in a certain way, undermine what we really wanted to take with us and move along on this journey as well. Now, I want to be clear, it doesn't always have to be that way. It's not an either or. The beauty of Judaism is there's got to be a way that both fit together, right? How do we utilize that? One of the things going into Shabbos is we bring the most delicious food around the Shabbos. We bring out the best cutlery. We celebrate everything and say, we put on our finest clothes. We say, this is important. So I'm going to take all my riches and wealth and direct it towards enhancing my Shabbos and Friday night experience, right? That's taking those values and saying, great, I'm blessed with other stuff. I'm going to fuse that. We should never see it as bifurcated, and God forbid ever see it as running towards the things that we think society defines as strength and wealth. Rather, we should take the essence of who we are and moving forward. And I think that that's also important if we just sort of, for the last couple seconds, we know etzem and eitz also comes from tree, and we're coming up to Tu B'Shvat. Right, in Tu B'Shvat, there's so many messages, and maybe we'll touch upon a few of them next week instead, even though it's a day or two afterwards. But the trees are exactly like that. They say you got to dig your roots deep, right? It's not the things that you see in life that are so important. It's what's underground, underneath the source, that gives us its strength. And if that's rooted and that's strong, then the peiros, the fruit that it produces, become beautiful and amazing. But if all that's important is what you see above ground, you think that's the strength, along comes some little wind, if it has no roots, and the whole tree topples over. Right? It's not how big that tree looks on the outside, the strength of what you see. It's the depth under the surface of what's rooting something, which gives it its value. And therefore, when the Jews are leaving Egypt saying, we made it through here, how did we make it through 210 years of slavery and exile and pain? It's because there were people there that said we have to maintain our identity despite all the odds, and that's where our strength from, and that's the greatest inheritance. Morashak Hilas Yaakov, when it says it's inheritance for the Jewish people, it's not talking about the T4, right? It's talking about what's going to happen with the values that we have and how we give that over. Moshe, as a leader, realized that value. He sets the lesson for us as well. And we always have to keep our eye on the ball of what is A, strength, what is B, wealth. And then more importantly, when I think about the people who felt most enriched in their lives and had such strength and character, who are those people and how do we schlep them along with us? Not just the physical bones, but the atzmius, the essence of who they are. Plant that tree with those roots, that eitz, and that is what bears the peiros and the fruits that we want to see in our lives and the generations moving forward as well. Chevra, awesome as always to see all the faces. Awesome as well, not as awesome to see just the names on the tab, but it's also good to see the names, but the faces are great. And wishing everyone an awesome Shabbos. Have a great Shabbos, Chevra. Shabbat
Shabbat
shalom.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
All right.
Shabbat shalom.